Your knowledge of contract language is imperative.
You must know what a violation looks like if you wish to be active in its cessation.
It is important to understand that being active and knowledgeable affects your overall bargaining strength.
Together, we can forge a more militant NALC. Good morning, letter carriers, and welcome back to Parcels of Knowledge, the podcast dedicated to delivering knowledge to the city letter carrier, with your host, the Roseville Wrecking Ball. Today, we have a special episode with a guest interview, surprise interview from Alan Gegax. We're going to drop some bombshell information you didn't know about his personal life. He also has an interview on his podcast that's going to be dropped that he did an interview with me. So, without further ado, I'll meet you on the other side.
Okay, we are recording. Take it away.
All right, so let's start this thing off from the top. Can you state your name and introduce yourself for the record?
Sure. For the record, let the record show that my name is Alan Gegax, and I am a city letter carrier in good standing in Branch 2502, Las Vegas, Nevada, and I am the host of the Classes of Mail podcast.
Nice. All right. So we're going to start with some personal questions. I know we're here doing a question and answer.
Sure.
So you have stated before that the best day as a mailman came earlier in your career when on Christmas Day, you guys looked through the packages to make sure to deliver the gifts on Christmas Day.
Yeah.
Do you still feel that way?
I do. I love this question. Man, you prepared. Yes, that was absolutely my most satisfying day as a letter carrier. It came out, I was still a PTF at the time, working at the strip post office. And yeah, we came in on Christmas Day. I don't remember what the circumstance was that made it that we were in there on Christmas, but that's it. A supervisor came in, opened up the station, and the volunteers who wanted to do it, they said, just look through the hampers, look for anything that looks like a Christmas present and deliver it. And I went out and knocked on people's doors on Christmas Day and brought this Christmas miracle, the present that they didn't think was going to get there. It was incredibly satisfying.
Yeah, that's a very classic mailman story. I'm glad you got to do that. I never worked on Christmas myself.
Yeah, it was great.
Now, most people don't know this, but on January 27th in 2017, you appeared on season 15 of Who Wants to Be a Millionaire.
It's
ultimately
true.
Walking away with $20,000. Can you tell us about the time
spoil
you
the
were
ending.
a game show contestant?
Yeah, I was. So I am a trivia guy, and I've applied for Jeopardy multiple times. That test is hard. But the test to get on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, not very hard, especially because it's all multiple choice. So I'd applied multiple times. But after you pass the test, you go for this on-camera audition where they want to gauge your personality. And after a couple of attempts at that, eventually I got that figured out. And they had just rebooted Who Wants to Be a Millionaire with the host Chris Harrison. They were filming it for the first time in Las Vegas. And so I was able to go down, take the test, get my on-camera screen test. And then I was on. I got selected. I was in the very first day of recording here in Las Vegas. And it was super fun. I got out there and I was like really nervous. And, you know, like they keep you in the green room and you're all sequestered. And then you come out and I knew like, oh, that first question, that's going to set the tone. And I'd been watching the show. I'd been getting to know Chris Harrison from other stuff that he's done. And I could tell that he had like some improv training, that if I made a joke or whatever, that he would play along with it. And so the very first question comes up is, in the song by Sir Mix-a-Lot, Baby Got Back, what's the opening line? And my mind just froze. And all I could think about was LA faced with the Oakland booty. And I'm trying to work backward. And then as the choices come up, thank God for multiple choice, because I see the answer D, I like big butts. And so I say, well, Chris, I think I speak for both of us when I say D, I like big butts. And he goes, yeah, you know it. And right away, we got that rapport. And so as it went on, like I was able to crack jokes with him. Like he made a joke that it turned out that we had essentially matching ties. And he goes, oh, I see you got the memo about matching ties. And I said, yeah, so I assume that means you accept my invitation to the Sadie Hawkins dance. And he laughed at that, and it was so much fun. And at the end, I walked away with $20,000, and it was kind of my goal because I wanted to remodel our kitchen. My wife has chronic illness, and the way our kitchen was set up just made things very difficult for her. And that wound up being essentially just enough to remodel the kitchen. And I had a good enough time on the show, and it went well enough that they gave me the entire episode. So yeah, it was a lot of fun. It was very satisfying, and $20,000, hard to complain about that.
Yeah, it's really cool. The clip online, I'm going to link it in the description of the podcast. It's only 20 minutes long. Is that how long it took to record?
Yeah. Well, no, I don't remember how long it took in studio. It feels longer, but I know that like from watching other tapings, even that day, they do a lot of what are called pickups, where if you don't speak clearly, they have to go back and you have to like re-record it. Because with game shows, it's really strict. Everything has to be official, and they have all these rules they have to follow. And so for me, there were no pickups. Everything went just like when I record my podcast. Everything goes down the first time and you're good to go. And they used almost everything that I did while I was there. So yeah, it was a great experience. The 20 minutes is because it's cut for TV, and so they add commercials and stuff. And so yeah, that sounds like that's my full airing on Millionaire. That's awesome. Dude, I haven't seen that in ages. I thought it was gone forever. I'm going to have to click that link.
Are you really an avid hiker?
Oh, very much so. So right about the time I started at the post office, I also started with a hiking group here in Vegas called Vegas Hikers. It's on a site called meetup.com where people of common interest get together and do the thing that they're interested in. There's meetup groups for everything. There's meetup groups for knitting and for board games. I'm in a board game group too, and for all kinds of stuff. But the one that I run now is for hiking. And when I took over the group, this was back in 2006, we had about 500 members. Now we have about 30,000 members. And we average over 100 events a month. It's all free. And that's also how I was able, well, you might ask about that in the future. So yeah, it's been fantastic. I absolutely love hiking. I hike as often as I can. Even though I hike all day when I'm parking and looping. But to me, like that helps to keep me in trail shape. You know, that I can go a couple weeks without hiking, and when I get back out there on the trail, I know I'm going to be able to do it because of the park and loop.
That makes sense. Did your grandfather help build the Spirit of St. Louis?
You know, that came up on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. That was one of the reasons that episode went so well, is because with the questions, I was able to kind of personalize the questions. And there was a question about the Spirit of St. Louis. And yeah, that's kind of a family lore, because we had this old picture of my grandfather standing in front of the Spirit of St. Louis, Charles Lindbergh's plane. The airport in San Diego is Lindbergh Field. And there was this connection that at least some of the plane was built in San Diego. And yeah, my grandfather helped take part in that. Dude, these are great questions. I never get asked questions like this. Joshua, man, right. I'm loving this interview.
I appreciate it. Yeah, all right, let's get on to the harder stuff. I understand that your nominations have been recently done. How did they go, and what did you get nominated for?
Well, as we record this, our nominations were last night, and it did not go according to plan. So I had received, for listeners of Classes of Mail, you'll be familiar that there's a recent episode, if you go back, it says, "We just got another victory," and it's a big one, something like that, like a letter from National. And it was a letter from Brian Renfro where I had sought a presidential ruling to ensure my interpretation of our bylaws, and basically the way it's done at every other branch across the country that has steward elections, is that you can run for an officer position, but you can also run for a steward position, and those don't conflict because stewards are not officers. And there's no reason that you can't be an officer in your branch, like, say, the secretary, and also serve as a steward. Those things do not conflict with each other. And so just to make sure, I sent President Renfro a letter to get his ruling on it, and he confirmed that, yeah, there's no prohibition on that. That's just fine. And so we get to the meeting last night, and that's my plan. Me and a number of people are planning on running as steward in our station, and then also running for whatever office that we're running for. And why this is important is because if you were to limit people to only being able to be a steward or only an officer, you wind up losing people from really, really qualified, excellent servants. You lose them because there are people, last night who I would like to do the treasurer position, but I don't want to lose my position as a steward. And so, with this dual nominations, you can do both. And so right before we get to the nominations, the branch president stands up there, and he got this letter from Renfro as well. And then he actually wrote to Renfro. That's the second. There's another episode about this. He wrote to Renfro trying to get Renfro to change his mind. Renfro didn't change his mind. And then the president stood up at our meeting, my branch president, and said, hey, I make the decisions about what our bylaws mean. And in my interpretation, the bylaws say that you can't run for both of those positions. And so, of course, I appeal his decision under Article 11. I appeal it to the branch. But, dude, any of you guys, you know how the branch meetings go, especially if you've been listening to Classes of Mail. You've got the executive board that all is essentially a block of votes. And then you have, retirees who almost always vote in lockstep with the executive board. And so we had this vote on my branch president's interpretation, and it wound up going 38 to 32 in favor of the branch president. So that means that, as usual, as has been the case again and again, the people who actually put the mail in the box are voting with us. They're on the right side of history. But the incumbent machine is, once again, too much to overcome. And so now we find ourselves in this situation where the Constitution clearly says that this is allowable. Our branch bylaws don't prohibit it, but we've made a ruling now that puts our bylaws in conflict with the Constitution and, of course, disenfranchised people from being able to run for what they wanted to run for. So I wound up only running for vice president. And that's how, and so now I am a candidate for vice president in branch 2502. The ballots are going out maybe as you listen to this. And that's how the meeting went.
Nice.
Yeah.
Are you on a ticket? And if so, what position does your ticket encompass?
Yeah, I am on, it's kind of an informal ticket. We have the branch 2502 Reform Caucus, which is our reform movement within the branch, but it's kind of disparate. We have people who are supporters of us. They run, they vote with us. They see the same problems at the branch that we see, but they don't necessarily want to be part of a slate. And I get that. When Michael and I ran the first time, it was just president, executive vice president, and vice president. And that was it. Because honestly, it's good for the branch to have people of differing views on the executive board. You see it at the national level. The rubber stamp that is the executive council, at least until very recently, it's not healthy. And so we have kind of this ragtag assemblage of reform-minded people from all around our branch. And you know the names of the incumbents if you're in branch 2502, and essentially every other name on that ballot is the reform-minded candidates, the Reform Caucus or equivalent. And at the top of the ticket is Michael Brazenly, my co-host on Classes of Mail, and he's running for president.
Awesome. Now, what difference can you in particular make, and what is your mission statement / plans, and how and why should your branch membership entrust you for your new position?
Yeah, so it's a great question. As a vice president, it's a full-time officer position, which means I'm going to be down at the hall all the time. And it's important to have someone who is kind of a voice for the carriers down at the hall and a voice for the bylaws and for things being run properly. Again and again, our branch has had these problems of malfeasance, and the answer from the branch officers continues to be, well, this is the way we've always done it. And that's the problem. If you listen to Classes of Mail, I read the manuals. I've read the JCAM from cover to cover, the ELM, the M39, all this stuff. And I've read our bylaws. I've read our Constitution. And we're not doing the things that we're supposed to be doing. And we've all agreed that these bylaws are how we're going to run our branch. And so the branch needs that voice in the room to say, no, this is not right. You're disrespecting the will of the members, and we need to run this branch appropriately. So that's reason number one. And the reason that I'm running for that position. Also, as vice president, it's kind of a teaching position, and that's what I'm good at. That communication, that getting up in front of the room and explaining things, providing that leadership, that's stuff that our branch really needs, and that those are my strengths that I bring to that position. So I think there was a third part to your question, but I don't remember what it was. So I hope I answered it.
I think essentially you answered all three.
All right, cool. Hey, good job, man.
Why does it seem
I
like
want to add one more thing, actually.
leadership...
Hold on a second. I want to add one more thing. And that's that, what I also intend to bring to the branch is openness. Right now, when things go to our union hall, they're essentially in a black hole. And we have this toxicity where people don't want to call the union hall. They don't want to talk to people down there. And we don't know what's going on in the hall. And that's something else that obviously I have this platform. I'd like to open the door. I'd like to shine a light on what the branch is doing.
That's always a great thing to bring to the table. Now, why does it seem like your branch leadership is being intransigent in terms of treating you guys fairly, even in the face of people like Renfro telling them that you are right?
It's a great question. And unfortunately, the lines of communication are so broken that I can't really directly answer that question. I mean, in the first time that we ran this election, because this is a rerun because our first election was so tainted. And during that first tainted election, we started getting ballots that were screwed up, like ballots that weren't coming first class. They were coming pre-sorted standard. And the return envelopes didn't have any postage. And so we started asking questions of the folks down at the hall, of our president and of the chair of the election committee. Hey, what's going on? And they either claim ignorance or they say that they're not going to answer. We essentially get stonewalled. Well, after National had to come in and investigate, we found out that the very people we were asking what was going on, they are the people who ordered the ballots. And my branch president ordered the ballots in his own election where he was the candidate. And it's madness. And so we have this problem where they're protecting themselves. The reason that the election chair never said why he stonewalled us, but when we found out what the truth was, that his partner, the president, was committing all this wrongdoing, well, now the answer is pretty obvious. They're not going to admit to that. And that's a big part of it. The other part is they've got a good gig up there. It's very hot in Las Vegas. This summer hasn't been too bad, but last year we hit 120. It's not unusual to be above 110 in the summer. And sitting in an air-conditioned office, working on grievances or whatever, it beats sitting in an LLV. And, the pay is nice, and there are very good reasons to want to hold on to that position. So when you get somebody like me coming in as a rabble-rouser, somebody causing trouble, asking questions, hey, how come you're not doing this? Yeah, the things that I'm asking, they come straight out of the bylaws. I'm not asking for crazy things for my branch to do. I want them to just abide by the bylaws. But they don't like that because that threatens their position. I mean, it goes as petty as not appointing me steward. In the last election, once again, just like in this one, where they said, hey, you can only run for one position. You can't do both. So I had to not run for steward. And then even though there was a vacancy, the president would not appoint me as steward. And he's required to fill those vacancies in our bylaws, and he just won't do it because it's gatekeeping.
Now, you mentioned Las Vegas, so I gotta ask you, how much money is the most money you've ever won on a lunch break at a casino?
You're not supposed to gamble while you're in uniform. Yeah, so
that trick question.
Yeah, there you
go.
go.
Due process.
Right. Yeah, well, I'm sure the statute of limitations has expired. In fact, I didn't know. Look, that's a provision that's in the ELM. And nobody's ever read the ELM. You don't know what that stuff is. And so for quite a while, I'd go here in Las Vegas, everywhere has slot machines. And so you go into 7-Eleven, there's slot machines there. And so I would go into 7-Eleven, I'd drop a $5 bill in the slot machine, and, maybe my lunch is free. Usually it's not. And anyway, and an old timer pulled me aside and he's like, "Hey, you can't be doing that while you're in uniform. You're on the clock, and that is not okay." And so I stopped doing that. But the most I've ever won generally was a slot jackpot for $2,000. And that was really cool because back at the time, that was in the year 2000. And I was able to use that money to take a once in a lifetime trip to East Africa. And I went on safari for 7 days in the Serengeti and other surrounding parks. It was absolutely incredible.
Man, you seem to be a world traveler.
Well, those are my two, the one I just took, and then the Serengeti trip. Those are the 2 times that I have left the United States, if you don't count Canada and Mexico.
Go ahead, talk about your most recent trip. If
All right,
like.
yeah, so sure. So this was my only bucket list item is I wanted to go to Peru and hike the Inca Trail to Machu Picchu. And so I just finished that a couple of weeks ago, and it was phenomenal. It's a 4-day hike. It's 26 miles, over 10,000 feet of elevation gain and elevation loss, and it's so steep. And day 2 is just super steep, and then there's all these stairs, and it was a hell of a hike, but being a mailman actually helped to prepare me for that, because doing a park and loop route, you have to get up and do that every single day. And so your body kind of gets used to it, that, okay, today was a tough day. I'm going to go home, get some sleep, and then I'm going to get up and do it again tomorrow. And so on day 2, when a lot of people were hurting, I was all right. Okay, I can do this again. And so the hike itself was incredible. Like, even if there weren't archaeological sites, going through the Andes was so scenic. The Andes are incredibly jagged and dramatic mountains. They're young mountains, or at least they look like young mountains to me. And so they're just a lot of sharp edges, and they're snow covered at the top, and the views along the trail hiking through the Andes were absolutely phenomenal. And then there were sections of the trail where we'd drop down and we'd be in jungle, and I'd never hiked in jungle before. So even without the archaeological sites, it was absolutely amazing. But then, of course, you add Machu Picchu and other archaeological sites on top of it, and it was a phenomenal trip.
Sounds like it. All right, let's get one more last question on the serious note, and then
All right.
we got one other thing after that. So
Cool.
You and me have spoken about the value of a good grievance tracking system and what it can do on a branch.
Yep.
Do you intend on improving on your current contract enforcement in your branch? And if so, what differences will you or your ticket make?
Yeah, so Michael Brazenly and I have this idea. Right now, our website is doesn't serve much purpose. And we like the idea, when grievances go up from the hall, like if you're an informal A, your formal A may not necessarily be at your station. It could be an officer who works down, or somebody who works down at the union hall. And so when it leaves your hands, that's it. It's gone. And who knows what happens next, where it is, what the process is, if it got delayed. We have those kind of backups here, just like everywhere else. And so, hey, what's the status of my grievance? So people will call the union hall to check the status of their grievance, and it's a huge time waster for the people down at the hall, and the whole process could be readily streamlined. So we have this idea of using the website to post essentially what's the status of the grievances, where you would see, like, each grievance has a grievance number. So as long as you know your grievance number, you can go onto the website, look for that grievance number, and see what the current status of that grievance is, whether it's at informal A, formal A, on to step B, going to arbitration, resolved, withdrawn, whatever it is. And then that also helps to provide some transparency, because in many cases, if grievances are withdrawn, it's done under the cover of darkness, and the union should not be doing anything under the cover of darkness. And so this would, again, help to shine that light on what our branch is actually doing, what the officers are doing to serve the membership.
Awesome. All right, one final question. Is there
ready.
anything else you would like to add?
It's so open-ended. I'd like to add that what's happening in my branch is not unique. And the incumbents have this tremendous advantage. They win well over 90% of their elections. And, for a number of reasons. The incumbent officers can go to the stations. They can go around and glad hand and talk to people. And while that's not technically campaigning, it is campaigning because people get to know your name, they know your face. And honestly, you know the way people vote. Oh, I know who that person is. I'm going to vote for that person. And so it's extremely difficult for reform-minded people like Michael and me to get in to make positive change in their branches. And so when you see that kind of thing happening, man, talk to those people. Ask those people questions. If you see somebody like that at your branch, oh my God, that it makes such an incredible difference just to say like, hey man, I see what you're doing and I appreciate it. You know, that means the world. Because in my own branch in particular, you know, I'm under no illusions that I'm going to easily win this upcoming re-election. The incumbents still have every advantage. But I can tell you that we are absolutely making positive changes at the branch level because we're not sitting down, because we're not shutting up, because we are speaking out at what we see as these violations of the bylaws, as these problems within our branch, and we're not hiding from it. So even if you're not that person who is willing, you know, who has what it takes to stand up. I mean, I didn't have that either. If you listen to those earlier episodes, like the one where I got fired from the Carrier Academy, you'll hear me say openly that I'm scared and I'm worried that I'm going to lose my steward position if I keep pushing for reform. And in fact, I did lose my steward position because I kept pushing for reform. And so, but ultimately, they can't take your birthday away. You know, that I'm still, everything's okay. Like you will make progress. You will move forward. And so even if that's not you, when you see that person, pat them on the back, you know, let them know that there is support for them. The emails that I get through classesofmail@gmail.com, that keeps me going. It is emotionally difficult. I'm a non-confrontational person. And it's like an issue in my marriage because my wife was raised in a household that had a ton of confrontation and she's used to it. And my house was always peace. And so I don't know how to deal with conflict. And so by my nature, all this stuff is extremely uncomfortable for me. And so getting that support, getting that feedback that yeah, you're doing the right thing. Yes, that is what the bylaws say. And yeah, they should be doing that. It makes all the difference in the world.
Well, there you have it. My investigative interview with the great Alan Gegax. Do you think he understood what his due process rights were? Is there just cause to charge him with being the fastest podcaster west of the Mississippi? Only you can decide. I have linked his podcast, Classes of Mail, and I've also linked his YouTube video of his Who Wants to Be a Millionaire episode in the description of the current episode of my podcast that you're listening to. It's a pretty good watch, and he's got a good podcast. Maybe you can hop over there if you haven't done so already. Subscribe to that guy. Him and Michael Braismilly, they're pretty cool guys. But hopefully you learned something valuable today. And as always, have a good day.
Shout out to the Roseville Wrecking Ball. He is an Article 8 scholar, and thank God. We need Article 8 scholars right now. The Grievous Genius and the Roseville Wrecking Ball doing amazing work.
Brothers and sisters, this guy is good, man. He's fucking good.
And my boy Joshua, he killed it. Man, he's lockstep right now. He's killing it.
You would think this guy has been around for 30